Well, thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, brethren. All around the world this week, people celebrated the arrival of a new calendar year. For many, the arrival of a new year means new beginnings. Of course, resolutions are popular at this time of year, and most of them will probably be broken in relatively short order. However, some changes will take place, and people will start on new journeys as they try to achieve different goals or deal with evolving circumstances and realities. In this country, for instance, we will soon be inaugurating a new old president. He's new and old. And we can expect alterations in domestic and foreign policy from our national government. In this very congregation, we have also experienced a change in leadership as we welcome our new pastor. And that has already led to a shift in our scheduled time for services, and also some changes in the bulletin. If you saw them yesterday, we have a new format too. So on a personal level, though, many of us can expect to encounter and navigate new challenges this year, whether by choice or by necessity. All of this has led me to reflect recently on how we should approach new undertakings as Christians. One biblical figure who can provide important lessons on this subject is none other than the patriarch from whom the nation of Israel receives its name, Jacob. Today, we will take a look at the story of Jacob in the book of Genesis, and through this examination, we will draw 4 important lessons about what we should do when embarking upon new beginnings. In the interest of saving time, we will not cover the entire story of Jacob. We will mainly be focused on Jacob's journey to Padan Aram to find a wife, his experiences with his uncle Laban, and his return home to face Esau. Therefore, I will begin with a little summary of the beginning of Jacob's story to provide context for these events and to refresh your memories, even though I'm sure most of you know the tale of Jacob quite well. As you may recall, Jacob and his brother Esau were first mentioned jostling in Rebekah's womb in Genesis 25. When their mother asks the Lord what is happening to her, he tells her that the enmity between the two children foreshadows rivalry between the two nations that would arise from the brothers, and that one would be stronger than the other, and that the older would serve the younger. Jacob would become the father of Israel, and Esau would found the nation of Edom. Genesis 25 goes on to tell us that even though Esau was born first, Jacob was able to acquire the birthright from his brother by taking advantage of his hunger. Genesis 25 ends by stating that Esau despised his birthright because he impetuously exchanged it for a bowl of soup. Not a good business decision. In Genesis 27, Jacob further solidifies his hold over the birthright by deceitfully acquiring the firstborn's blessing from his father Isaac, after tricking the blind old man into believing that he was Esau. Upon discovering his treachery, both Isaac and Esau became angry with Jacob, and Esau said to himself that he would kill Jacob after his father's death. Chapter 27 ends with Rebekah learning of Esau's intentions, which led to her plan to send Jacob to her brother Laban to find a wife. So after receiving a blessing from Isaac and instructions to take a wife from among Laban's daughters, Jacob set off for Padan Aram. I would like to pick up the story here in Genesis 28, verse 10, and read to the end of the chapter. We'll read from the English Standard Version. All of our scriptures today are in the English Standard Version. But we'll read from the English Standard Version about Jacob's dream and his reaction to it in Genesis 28, verses 10 through 22. Genesis 28, verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you." So here we find lesson number 1. Make sure to include God in your plans. Lesson number 1, make sure to include God in your plans. Whenever starting a new endeavor, we should seek God's wisdom, guidance, and protection. Many enterprises have failed because those who undertook them relied solely on their own understanding and abilities without considering the Lord and what he desires both for us and from us. People are fallible, and we are likely to be unsuccessful or act in a manner contrary to our calling if we do not ask for God's favor or seek his counsel. There are a lot of verses in the book of Proverbs that reinforce this point. For example, we are advised in Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6, to trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Proverbs 16, verse 3 says, "Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established." And Proverbs 16, verse 9 reminds us that the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Several other writers in the Bible touch upon this theme as well. Chapter 30 of the book of Isaiah begins with the Lord chiding the Israelites for carrying out their own plans, which were not of his spirit, and adding sin upon sin. And Isaiah 55:9 reminds us of the supremacy of God's intelligence with these words. Isaiah 55, verse 9. "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Likewise, the prophet Jeremiah wrote in Jeremiah 10, verse 23, "I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself, that it is not in man who walks to direct his steps." These words from the prophets are echoed in sentiments expressed in the New Testament as well. For instance, verses 13 through 15 of James 4 remind us that none of our plans will amount to anything unless the Lord allows us to carry them out. Furthermore, in Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 17, Paul wrote the following, Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 17. Paul wrote, "Look carefully, then, how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." As we will soon see, Jacob would not have been successful in his dealings with Laban if it had not been for the Lord's help. Therefore, brethren, before setting sail on your next great adventure or tackling that next big task, remember what Jacob realized after his vision. Include God in your plan and ask for his benevolent guidance and protection so that your actions will not only lead to success, but also please him. Now, let's get back to the story of Jacob. Genesis 29 tells us that things didn't go as Jacob had planned after he took residence with his uncle. Even though Jacob was blessed in a covenantal relationship with God, the Lord still had some tough lessons in store for Jacob. Jacob, the supplanter and deceiver, was about to be given a taste of his own medicine from his uncle Laban. As you all know, Jacob agreed to work 7 years for Laban's daughter Rachel. After the agreed upon 7 years elapsed, Laban pulled the same bait and switch move that Jacob had used to secure his father's blessing by bringing Jacob his eldest daughter Leah under cover of night. Takes a dog to know a dog, they say. When Jacob realized the next morning that Laban had deceived him, Jacob was angry. Laban excused his actions by claiming that it was customary to marry off the younger daughter only after the older daughter had wed. And he said that Jacob could also have Rachel after a week, as long as he promised to work another 7 years for him. Jacob agreed to this arrangement, which led to Jacob marrying both of Laban's daughters and becoming embroiled in a baby-making arms race between the two sisters that even included their female servants. Oh, Jacob was a busy and troubled man. However, despite these setbacks, Jacob was able to turn the tables on Laban with God's help. Jacob was able to take most of Laban's wealth from him while employed in his service. Here is how Jacob described the situation to Leah and Rachel in Genesis 31, verses 5 through 13. So we'll read Genesis 31, verses 5 through 13. Jacob said to his wives, "I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, 'The spotted shall be your wages,' then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, 'The striped shall be your wages,' then all the flock bore striped. Thus, God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, 'Jacob.' And I said, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred.'" This brings us to lesson number 2. Stay patient, and be ready to adapt. Lesson number 2, stay patient and be ready to adapt. For Jacob to be successful in this seemingly no-win situation, he had to learn to roll with the punches and rely on God's assistance. No matter how many times Laban attempted to swindle Jacob or move the goalpost, so to speak, Jacob was ready to adapt to the ever-changing conditions, and he was determined to thrive regardless of the new circumstances. As God's people, we can emulate Jacob's example of patiently relying on God to help us through our trials. The words of Psalm 37, verse 34, remind me of the situation between Jacob and Laban. This is Psalm 37, verse 34. "Wait for the Lord and keep his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. You will look on when the wicked are cut off." Laban and his sons were certainly upset to see Jacob take all Laban's wealth right out from under him, and Jacob's wives were happy to take it with them to the land Jacob inherited from his father Isaac and grandfather Abraham. If we go back a bit in Psalm 37, we will see these words of advice in verses 7 through 9 of Psalm 37. "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoer shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land." So, brethren, when we experience setbacks as we start something new, and we will experience setbacks, remember these words from Psalm 37 and the wisdom of Paul. In Romans 12, verse 12, Paul said the following. Romans 12, verse 12, "Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer." And in Philippians 4, verses 11 through 13, Paul wrote, "Not that I am speaking of being in need, For I have learned in whatever situation I am to be, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Jacob and his family left Laban without announcing their departure, but Laban pursued them when he discovered that they fled. However, Genesis 31, verse 24, says that God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." So Laban did not harm Jacob or take anything from him when he caught up with him. After unsuccessfully searching for his family idols, which were secretly stolen by Rachel before they left, Laban blessed his daughters and grandchildren and returned home. Genesis 32 tells us that Jacob was concerned about how his brother would receive him when he returned, and he sent messengers ahead with gifts to inform Esau of his coming and his desire to make amends. When those messengers returned, telling Jacob that Esau would be coming to him, accompanied by 400 men, Jacob was scared because he remembered Esau's past threats. Even after sending gifts of appeasement, Jacob was afraid for his life and the lives of his family and servants. He prayed to God for help and sent his family and possessions on ahead of him to protect them. Genesis 32, verses 24 through 29, describe what happens next. And we'll read these verses. Genesis 32, verses 24 through 29. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. This illustrates lesson number 3. Lesson number 3, hold on tightly to what is valuable and dispose of what is not. Hold on tightly to what is valuable and dispose of what is not. Despite Jacob's weakness as a man, demonstrated by the Lord's ability to displace his hip with a simple touch, Jacob would not let go of God until he received a blessing from him. Jacob knew where his salvation lied, and he was determined to hold on to that with everything he had. For his efforts, God gave him a new name and a blessing. We should follow Jacob's example in this too, brethren. We must recognize that our relationship with God is the most valuable thing that we have in life, and we must latch on to it with a firm grip, no matter how long or difficult our struggle is. This is our hope and our salvation. Not that our lives will be without pain or obstacles, but that our lives will ultimately be redeemed if we keep the faith and fight the good fight. In Romans 8, verses 22 through 28, Romans 8, verses 22 through 28, Paul explains, "For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." In his hit song, The Gambler, Kenny Rogers said, "The secret to surviving is knowing what to throw away and knowing what to keep." Jacob understood what to throw away and what to keep. In Genesis 35, Jacob buried the foreign idols that members of his household brought with them from Paddan Aram, and he continued holding fast to his relationship with God. When we begin a new endeavor, we should also carefully consider what is worth keeping and what is hindering our progress, especially when it comes to our own relationship with God. We'll conclude our examination of Jacob's story with the reunion of Jacob and Esau, which is related in Genesis 33, verses 1 through 11. Let's read those verses. Genesis 33, verses 1 through 11. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants. And he put the servants with their children in front. I'm sure they were thankful for that. Then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all, because he loved them most, of course. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And when Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the servants drew near, and they and their children, and bowed down. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And last, Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that I met?" Jacob answered, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob said, "No, please. If I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." Thus he urged him, and he took it. This is a wonderful account highlighting Jacob's acts of contrition, as well as Esau's capacity for forgiveness. Esau reveals godly character in charitably accepting Jacob's peace offering while forgiving and forgetting Jacob's past transgressions. Jacob, who likely developed a true understanding of how badly he wronged Esau after dealing with his dishonest uncle for decades, showed genuine love and respect for his brother upon seeing him again. Both men displayed attributes of what Paul would later describe as the fruits of the Spirit, and their attitudes and actions serve as a model of atonement and reconciliation that we can follow in our own interactions with others. So lesson number 4, our final lesson, is make amends and be willing to forgive. Lesson number 4, make amends and be willing to forgive. I thought about making this the first lesson to discuss today because of Christ's words in Matthew 5, verses 21 through 24. You may recall this exhortation from the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard, and this is Christ speaking in Matthew 5, verses 21 through 24. You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift." As Jesus makes clear, we should seek peace and reconciliation right away. In fact, a new undertaking may not even have a chance to be successful if there is not peace and goodwill between or among the people involved from the very outset. However, I saved this lesson for last because it fit better with the chronology of the story, and it is an important final point to take away from this chapter of Jacob's life. Paul sums up this lesson well with these words in verses 31 and 32 of Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, verses 31 and 32. "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. We cannot take on the character of God without first showing the willingness to forgive and make amends that Esau and Jacob illustrate in Genesis 33. Brethren, there is much we can learn from Jacob's quest for a wife and a new beginning. We should remember to include God and his goals for us in our plans, and we should turn to him in our trials. We should strive to be patient and flexible when experiencing setbacks. We should wisely discern what to keep and what to throw out, taking into special consideration how these things impact our relationship with God. And finally, we must learn how to forgive and seek forgiveness in order to maintain peace with others and demonstrate godly character. Jacob was truly blessed by God, but he also had serious character flaws that led to hardships in his life. He learned the hard way what it was like to be tricked and lied to from his uncle and later his own sons, who would one day fabricate their brother Joseph's death and punish Jacob for his foolhardy favoritism. Jacob paid a price for his sins, just as we do, but we can learn from his example. Jacob's sons, too, would someday learn the price of deceit in Egypt from the same brother they betrayed. But that is a story for another time. Have a wonderful Sabbath, brethren.